You take care of your dog, feed him, take him for walks, give him affection. And yet, without realizing it, you might be doing things that make him sad every day. And the most worrying thing is that these aren't obvious mistakes. They aren't things you do on purpose. They're common habits, everyday actions that seem normal, but that, in his mind, have a completely different impact. Because, contrary to what many people think, dogs also feel frustration, insecurity, emotional disconnection, but they don't show it in the way we expect. They don't complain, they don't explain, they don't point out the problem. But before I tell you, check if you're already subscribed to the channel. He simply changes. He becomes quieter, more distant, less animated, and most of the time, the owner doesn't even realize why. And that's exactly why this video can be a turning point in how you see your dog. Because today you're going to discover 5 things that might be making him sad. Things you might be doing right now, without having the slightest idea of the effect they cause. And after you understand this, you won't be able to ignore it anymore. Now answer me honestly. Are you sure your dog is really happy? Or do you just think he is? Because the difference between those two things can be much greater than you imagine. The first mistake that makes many dogs sad, and that almost no one notices, is a lack of genuine attention. And no, this doesn't just mean not playing or not going for walks. It means being physically present, but emotionally absent. Because nowadays it's very common for the owner to be there, in the same environment, but distracted by their cell phone, the television, other worries, while the dog tries to interact, tries to connect, and simply receives no response. And for the dog, this has a much greater impact than it seems. Because a dog doesn't measure affection by quantity, it measures it by quality. It perceives when you are truly there with it, and it also perceives when you are not. And when this happens frequently, it begins to adapt, not complaining, not insisting, but gradually distancing itself, becoming quieter, less animated, less interested in interacting. And that's where many people go wrong, because they interpret this as, it's calmer, when in fact it may be the opposite. It has simply stopped trying. Now think honestly. How many times has your dog tried to get your attention and you didn't even notice? How many times was he there, waiting for even the slightest bit of connection? And you were too busy to notice, because for him, those little moments make all the difference. And ignoring that, even unintentionally, is one of the quietest ways to make a dog sad. The second mistake that might be making your dog sad, and that many people believe is the right thing to do, is a lack of routine. It may seem simple, even irrelevant, but for a dog, routine isn't just about organization, it's about emotional security. Unlike us, who cope well with changes, unexpected events, and variations in our daily lives, dogs depend on predictability to feel stable. Schedules for eating, walking, sleeping, interacting. All of this creates a sense of control over their environment. And when this doesn't exist, when each day is different, when things happen randomly, they don't understand what to expect. And this uncertainty, even if silent, generates anxiety. But as always, they won't show it clearly. They won't complain about the lack of routine. They'll change their behavior. They might become more agitated at times, more apathetic at others, more needy, or even more distant. And the owner, without realizing the origin of the problem, ends up misinterpreting everything. You think it's personality, that it's a phase, that it's normal, when in fact the dog is trying to adapt to an unpredictable environment. Now think, does your dog know what will happen tomorrow, or is each day a surprise for him? Because what is freedom for you can be confusion for him. And living in an environment where nothing is predictable is one of the most silent ways to generate insecurity, and consequently, sadness. The third mistake that may be making your dog sad, and that many people make believing they are training, is excessive correction without connection. Correcting behavior is part of the process, of course, but when it happens without balance, without positive reinforcement, and without building a bond, the effect can be the opposite of what is expected. Because the dog doesn't understand correction in the same way you do. He doesn't think, "I'm learning." He feels, "Something is wrong with me." And when this is repeated many times, when he is frequently reprimanded, when he receives more no than positive attention, he begins to withdraw. He becomes more insecure, more hesitant, afraid of making mistakes, afraid of trying. And little by little, that curious, active, and spontaneous dog begins to disappear. He stops exploring, stops interacting confidently, even stops seeking contact at times. And the owner, without realizing what caused this, thinks it's working because the dog has become quieter, more obedient, when in reality he has only become more insecure. Now think honestly. When your dog makes a mistake, does he learn from it? Or does he just avoid acting out of fear of being corrected? Because there's a huge difference between teaching and blocking. And when correction isn't accompanied by connection, it doesn't build behavior. It builds insecurity. And that, over time, can completely transform how your dog feels in his environment. The fourth mistake that might be making your dog sad, and that many people don't even consider, is a lack of mental stimulation in their daily routine. And this goes far beyond walks or expending physical energy. Because a dog doesn't just need to run, it needs to think. It needs to explore, sniff, solve small challenges, and actively engage with its environment. When this doesn't happen, when its routine boils down to eating, sleeping, and repeating the same movements every day, its brain enters a state of monotony. And this lack of stimulation over time begins to affect its behavior. It may become more listless, more apathetic, less interested in things it previously enjoyed, or even develop repetitive behaviors as a way to compensate for this lack of stimulation. And the most curious thing is that many owners think they are doing enough because the dog doesn't cause trouble, doesn't destroy anything, and doesn't demand much. But in reality, this may be precisely a sign that it is not being challenged enough. Because a mentally stimulated dog is curious, interactive, and present. A dog without stimulation simply adapts to the void. Now think honestly, does your dog experience different things throughout the day? Or are all days the same for him? Because just as a body needs to move, the mind also needs to be stimulated. And when that's lacking, sadness doesn't appear as an obvious problem. It appears as silence. The fifth mistake that might be making your dog sad, and that almost no one notices, is a lack of clear communication. This happens when the dog simply doesn't understand what you expect from it. Because contrary to what many people imagine, dogs don't interpret the world based on words. They interpret patterns, signals, consistency. When you change your tone of voice, when you sometimes allow something and other times correct the same behavior, when you react differently to the same situations, you create a confusing environment. And for the dog, this confusion isn't just a detail, it's a constant source of insecurity. It doesn't know if it's doing something right or wrong, it doesn't know what it can or can't do. It can't predict your reaction. And this lack of clarity generates an unstable emotional state where it begins to act hesitantly, with doubt, sometimes even avoiding interaction so as not to make a mistake. And the most dangerous thing is that this isn't perceived as an obvious problem because it doesn't generate explosive behavior. It generates withdrawn behavior. It adapts, reduces initiative, reduces spontaneity, and little by little, that confident dog who interacted naturally begins to disappear. Because living in an environment where the rules change all the time doesn't teach, it confuses. And for a dog, not understanding its own environment is one of the most silent ways to generate emotional discomfort. Before I show you this bonus tip, do one quick thing. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, subscribe now. because this type of content can completely change the way you care for your dog. And the more you understand him, the better his life becomes. Now pay attention to this. One of the simplest and most powerful ways to improve your dog's emotional well-being is to create small moments of real connection every day. It's not about quantity of time. It's about quality. It's those minutes when you are truly present, without distractions, without your cell phone, without rushing, interacting, observing, understanding his behavior. It could be during a more attentive petting session, a walk where you let him explore calmly, or even a playtime moment where you truly enter his world. Because these small moments reinforce something essential: predictability, security, and bonding. And for the dog, this has a much greater impact than any mechanical routine. He doesn't need perfection. He needs genuine presence. And when this happens consistently, you begin to notice subtle but very important changes in his behavior. More tranquility, more confidence, more balance. Now, if you want to understand even more signs that your dog may be giving you and that you might be ignoring, watch the video that's appearing on your screen now, because it will complement everything you've just learned in a way that can completely change how you see your dog.